Welcome back, everyone. Here we are at May 4th. I don't know about the rest of you, but I am in shock that we're already here at May. How is that possible? And you know what is especially fun is over a year ago, we started practicing. So we started way back in the beginning of 2024, practicing to be able to bring this broadcast, and we went live a year ago in May. So may we all celebrate that. So I want to say a gracious hello to everyone and welcome. We have our esteemed panel here, Jim Porter, John Bonsall, Karen Elkins, Ken Pearson, and myself, and we are delighted to be with you. So we are tonight in lesson 44 of Unit 11, the last lesson in Unit 11. And we opted to do this in two parts, as we described a few weeks ago, because we felt the concepts were too important for us to rush through. But before we dive into a fabulous conversation here this evening, I'm going to ask Ken Pearson, my love, to take us through a meditation to have us all become centered and grounded where we are.
Okay. So as we talk about meditation, the idea of meditation is to unwind from our thinking status and to enter into stillness. And we do this by desire. So we understand that concentration is when we think all day long, we have our activities and we keep going. And then there comes a point where we feel the need to rest. That would be decentration. So when you go into meditation, the purpose of meditation is to get to that stillness, ask whatever question you might have, or get whatever answers you may be looking for. And then it also is a great time to just let everything unwind. So when we enter into meditation, we like to let our thoughts get longer and longer. It's almost like daydreaming. And I'll say a little quote from the Divine Iliad that always helps me to get into that state. And it goes like this. My soul quickeneth as the glory of thy anointing light descends upon me. Thy light is all around me. Thy light shines through me. Thy light encompasses me. I am dissolved in thy light. Thy light and my light have become one. I am immersed in my light. I am in thy light, knowing thy light. And here I say, be thou with me, so that I would not be myself alone ever again. And that's what this is about, entering your own light into stillness, letting go of the brain, and entering into the stillness of your own mind. As the kingdom of heaven is within, so is that still light of all knowing, all power, and all presence. And we desire stillness. We cannot think ourselves into stillness, nor unconcentrate, but we can desire. So as we desire to let our thinking unwind, we can detect our thoughts getting longer and longer, slower and slower, and we can tap into the rhythm of the waves that we can hear in the background, and the beauty of that sunset that you're seeing on the horizon. So just for a moment, allow yourself to desire stillness. And as you desire that stillness, let the rhythm of the waves make your thoughts longer and longer and quieter and quieter. And just take 30 seconds and we'll just listen to the waves as they cycle around. And as you quiet down, we'll say that petition prayer one more time. My soul quickeneth as the glory of thy anointing light descends upon me. Thy light is all around me. Thy light shines through me. Thy light encompasses me. I am dissolved in thy light. Thy light and my light have become one. I am immersed in my light. I am in thy light, knowing thy light. And here I say, be thou with me, so that I would not be myself alone ever again. And just allow yourself to sit into that oneness of your light and God's light being one within. Desire is the key to stillness. All right, come on back. And I hand it off to my love.
Thank you so much. Also gives me a chance to settle down before we dive in here. So a couple of things before we start. I want to say hello and welcome to you all. I see a lot of you tuning in from YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and others. Hello, Dee. Hello, Karen. Hello, Linda, and all of the rest of you. Thrilled to have you. I am going to ask James to bring up, we do have a broadcast coming up, an extra broadcast coming up this Wednesday. And Karen, if you would, share with the group what they can tune into this coming Wednesday.
Well, we have another person who has done many, many deep dives into Walter Russell's work, and another gentleman by the name of Keeley. And so I think we've had some things where we would like to explore a little bit deeper. And I think John Bonzo might join me in querying Mr. Dale Pond, but he's been an expert and been around for a very long time. So it's a different voice, a different insight. And so I'm welcome, and I think you'll enjoy Dale.
All right, thank you. And if you all would please join me in saying a big happy birthday to Miss Karen. Her birthday is tomorrow, so let's send her some love and celebrating the fact that she, the world is a better place because she is in it. So a gracious thank you, Karen, for all that you do. We have another lovely video this evening. I also want to mention before we dive into the lesson here today is that I purposely kept the quotes for these particular lessons all about the three omnis from previous lessons. And this is a change from what we normally do. Normally we bring out quotes from the sessions, the lesson that we're looking at. But to be honest with you, I wanted to anchor us all. These are big concepts, big lessons, and I wanted to anchor us all about wherever we were and really have us focus there during the breaks to give our brains a break. So I'm going to ask each one of the panel, what was your favorite part of the lesson before we dive in? John?
Well, it's tough to pick a favorite because it's all fantastic. But the mention of the inert gases and how that recording process takes place and how the cube, the spheres, the mirrors, the spiraling all takes place. It's difficult for me to pick out any one part of it, but it is intense. And like I said earlier, if you dive too deep, we don't want to lose you.
Well, and I want to comment on that because, lessons 1 through 9 is all about the science of man. Lessons 10 and 11 is the science of the cosmos. And so we're down to the last lesson of the science of the cosmos. And then on May 18th, we go into unit 12, which is, again, back to a philosophy discussion that wraps up the whole thing. So know that we're getting there. For those of you that have been with us all year, we are inching close to the finish line, at least this round, and how exciting that is. Jim, what was your favorite part? Then I'm going to Karen and Ken.
I liked where they pointed out, and John and Ken are going to go, oh, yeah, sure, Jim. That on their wave chart, that the center of the wave chart is carbon, and that's as dense as it gets. And I want to remind people, think about that when you're seeking to meditate and pray and commune with the universal one. This is the most difficult point in the universe to do that from, because it's pulling outward at forces that are beyond imagination, that when seen are incandescent. And you're working to stay centered in that divine that you are. So anyone that's even perceiving and to work and achieve that concept while here in the carbon octave is doing amazing work throughout the entire octave.
Oh, wow. That's certainly uplifting. Thank you, Karen.
Well, I think just to add to Jim, we are carbon-based beings. So maybe we are dead sometimes.
I definitely own up to that.
Okay, but that wasn't what got me in this lesson. What I liked about the lesson was that when he teaches this one, it's one thing to know the science, which you'll get. It's not that complicated. I did a video, I worked on it, and I think it explains it simply. And it actually is an accumulation of many of the others. So the compounding, I think, will finally settle in. That's one. But two, in this particular unit, it speaks to why you should know it, because that is the same process that happens within you. Okay. And so it is one that teaches you a lot about yourself.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. And Ken, before I comment.
Yeah, I like this one line actually, and I'm going to read it. We'll read it later on. The lessons to be learned from these principles is to attain such a character as to be assured of one's oneness with God. I think that's the quintessential essence of this whole message.
Right. I love that. I have to tell you, for me, this is my 4th time through the home study course, and I gained some real clarity about what these charts have finally mean. So for me, it was like a hallelujah. The doors opened and there was this dawning of how some of these charts worked. And I'm hoping to show that to you on the vibe board here this evening. So hello, Mr. Bruno. So glad to see you, dear. Always glad to see you. So let's dive in, shall we? Let's go ahead, James, if we'll show over here on 823. And I am going to ask John, if you would, to read that first paragraph and take us through that blue line at the bottom of that paragraph. If we'll scroll down there. He's working on it. All right, right there. A little bit larger. Okay,
all right.
Perfect.
Well, let's don't forget the opening words there.
Yes.
We open the doors wide to our roadmap into space. So let's not forget where we're going here. Okay. Once more, the time has come when it becomes imperative that we have a new look upon our universe and totally discard old concepts. Since science began, it has periodically erased old concepts and replaced them with new ones. Copernicus erased Ptolemy, and Galileo erased Copernicus. Then Faraday and Newton, Rutherford, together with Bohr, erased all of them. Science today will never know its own tragedy and what it is doing to disintegrate mankind unless it erases all old concepts and substitutes the truth of nature's workings.
All right, that's incredibly powerful, and I think lays the groundwork for the whole thing that we're getting ready to go into. So I love this next line when it's saying up to the year 1926. And so I wanted to have us pause for a moment, because I actually have some deep insight into the 1920s, because I had a part of my life where I lived with a 100-year-old woman who was born in 1916. And when I lived with her, I really did have an understanding. So 1926, when they were talking about it, this was just 3 years before the Depression. Okay, we had a lot of political and social change right following World War I. There were strikes going on in Britain. Our U.S. Marines were in Nicaragua, and there was an economic boom leading us up to it. So going back to this area of 1926, Jim, if you would, take us into that next paragraph, up to the year 1926, and let's open the door to Mendeleev.
Up to the year 1926, the door had been partly opened by Mendeleev, who gave the world a chart of elements perceivable by the eye as visible light, assisted by instruments which enlarged their scope to include hydrogen and the beginning, and hydrogen at the beginning and uranium at the end.
All right. So Ken, if you would read that next paragraph so we can dive into this. This is the impossibility in nature.
Can I make one comment though?
Sure.
On that one, because on that was when Jim and I were talking earlier. And the one is, the Manilov was the gentleman who could perceive from what he could see.
Yes.
And as Jim and I were talking earlier, it was the mystic in Walter Russell that actually could understand and see beyond it. And that's what gave us Beyond the Veil.
Yes.
So I think that's one thing, because I think we always talk about the mediocrity, but what it is when you tap in, you can tune on. So I think that is an interesting transition for that.
Very powerful. Ken? This is an impossibility.
Yeah, I need the script up. Text. This is impossibility in nature, which is actually a little misprint. This is a impossibility in nature, for without seed, nothing can grow. The inner gases are the seeds from which elements grow, just as plants likewise grow. Mendeleev shows only 5 of the 9 octaves which exist in nature. We show all 9 in our charts. These are necessary to include the 8 colors of the spectrum, or 4 pairs centered by white.
All right, so if we scroll down to the bottom of that page, that figure 73, for those of you that have a copy of your home study course, this was the Mendeleev chart of elements. And so as I was studying today, I went back and I was studying a little bit about him. And so he was a Russian chemist, and he was trying to arrange, he was working on a book, and he was trying to figure out how to arrange these. And he was writing all of these down on index cards, and he was placing them in front of him, trying to put them into patterns. And he actually, legend has it, that he actually had a breakthrough in his dreams. And so I wanted just to ask the group for a moment, because that's what I thought that was kind of a fascinating thing about this particular idea. Obviously, he was tapping in somehow. Does the panel want to comment on that?
It was his genius coming through. When you're in the genius stage, you're beginning your communion with Creator, but it's not like the mystic stage. The genius is seeking to gain new knowledge. The mystic is given fully that knowledge. So Mendeleev was able to go, like Karen said, and perceive what he could desire to know, but he could not see beyond what he did not desire. So he could not see beyond hydrogen. He could not visually show you a picture of hydrogen, beyond hydrogen. So therefore it did not exist to him. The difference is the genius perceives concept, the mystic knows.
All right, so let's go to the panel, because I think this is important, because he actually delivered this full paper in March of 1869 to the Russian Chemical Society. So 1869. So let's put that there at the end, inching towards the latter part of the 1800s. Walter Russell published his periodic chart, John, in what year?
1926, actually.
26.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I wanted everyone just to invite everybody that really, if we in humanity could be a little more fluid with things, we would actually expect to evolve. That's really the goal, is for us to evolve and lean towards what Jim, you were saying, and leaning into our knowing. And so we wouldn't take just one concept and hang on to it forever, but we would open the door for evolving. But that's not the way humanity tends to like things in black and white. And so whoever gets the ownership of the idea, it stays a long time until, like what John said earlier, one scientist outwits the other scientist.
Right.
Well,
we turn new concepts into religions. So we start to worship the new concept and don't see beyond it. And it becomes dogmatic.
Okay.
The other thing, just like Walter Russell, who had his Bhagavad Gita in his pocket, this Russian also studied the Vedas.
Ah, interesting. That's an interesting nugget. All right. So as we continue there, Ken, if you would consider to the top of 825 there, where they continue the conversation around the seed, because they use this. If we'll scroll down below the chart, James, and to the top of 825, this conversation about the seed continues.
Yes.
This is a wonderful
species. Oh, I'm sorry. You said the top of 825?
Top of 825, yeah. Continues the idea that you had before.
Oh, this is the one of, I'm sorry. Okay. I thought you were saying paragraph. This is a wonderful example of the unchangeability of the seed, even through death. The seed seemingly dies in the ground, but witness the weeds in your garden. Even though they are uprooted, they will return again and again. The understanding of this will help you in knowing why one octave grows from another, and that destruction of any such offshoot will cause a reversion to its parent species.
Okay, so let's all pause for a minute. I want to talk to you who are busy in your yards, John and Jim. So this concept, and for anybody who gardens, they understand this particular concept. So let's talk about how this shows up. I mean, I know I'm always amazed how weeds grow. I remember one time trying to move a peace lily out of when I moved into a new home and tried to move the peace lily, and every single time we dug it up, it still came back. That thing was as stubborn as it could possibly be. It was going to grow there no matter what we did and how many times we moved it. So I guess we couldn't get down to the seeds enough. So talk a little bit about this before we start going into the science. Remind
Mr. Miyagi would say a strong root.
Strong root. So John, what's that like in your farming life and on your farm?
Well, the moral of our story here in this paragraph is that you cannot destroy the seed, because the seed is within the inert gas. So to put these inert gases in perspective, and I wanted to make an additional comment when you were talking about Mendeleev and then Doc a couple years later. Well, here's the sad thing, right? Here it is, 2025, and we're still teaching Mendeleev's chart in schools and universities as it is the, right? It's the end all be all. And Dr. Russell 100 years ago said, no, you got it wrong. This is not how Mother Nature does it. This is the way Mother Nature does it. And man still hasn't incorporated the proper charts, even though we have them. Doc rented them. They're there. He gave them to the world, and they're just ignored. So I just wanted to make that known that we really haven't gone anywhere in 150 years.
Well, and I would say that for the first time, perhaps humanity is growing enough in consciousness that we are seeing more and more people willing to entertain it. And I think, to me, I see that as inspiring. So yes, we're a little slow to the punch, John. I'm with you on that one. And I am hopeful at this point that that's part of why people like us are doing so much. If you actually go in and Google Walter Russell, if you go to YouTube and look up Walter Russell, you're going to find that there's been a lot of students out there creating all kinds of works, trying to tap into this. So I do believe that there are many who actually know, KNOW, that there's something off with the current element of charts.
Now back to the weeds.
Chart of elements.
Yes. I hate those damn weeds. You can't get rid of them, but you have to stay on top of them. That's how you got to do it.
You do. Even Ken was spending time on the lawnmower this week, working on all the weeds in the grass. And nature just has a mind of its own. How many of you have actually experienced that in your own life? Nature seems to have a mind of its own, and you begin to understand this when you realize. Yes, Ken.
No, go ahead. Finish, love. I'll just come in after you. Just go ahead and wrap up what you were going to say.
No,
Begin to realize.
That you're beginning to realize just that nature, obviously there's something larger at play here, because when we as mankind think we're in control, we're really not. Nature will always win.
So the key to why we're talking about Mendeleev and why the Russells are bringing this up at this point in the home study course is because Dr. Russell uncovered the first 3 octaves, which can be known but cannot be seen. We know of helium because it's the first gas that we can harness and we can recognize. But those first 3 octaves, so this is the reason, and I just want to try and, again, not complicate this so much so the audience gets a grasp of why we're talking about Mendeleev, why we're talking about seeds, and what Doc is teaching us is the first 3 octave is where those seeds are that are going to rejuvenate and continue that cycle process. Without those first 3 octaves, all you have is a visible universe, but you're not considering the non-visible universe where it all begins and ends, quite frankly. So those first 3 octaves, and that's why we're talking about them. And they're not that complex to understand. There's not a bunch of elements in those 3 octaves.
Well, and also point out I'm sorry, I'll just be quick. Point out in the scientific world, as you've said, and they've said in the writings, Mendeleev his chart was accepted openly because he was a member of the scientific community. He was a chemist. They adopted that. Russell was a poet, philosopher, painter. They don't see him as a member of their group. Therefore, he's an outsider, and they don't want to look at it. But there's like you said, Kim, there's enough people coming around now, even within this newly burgeoning scientific community, that it's going to take off and be heavily adopted within the next 50 years.
I believe as well. So I want to just put everybody, some of you that are Russell students, it's important for us to remember as we continue, because a lot of what we do, so the Universal One is the book that was published in 1926, okay? So this is the book, the culmination of 5 years, almost 5 years of work from Walter Russell to take what he was, the knowledge he was given in his illumination of 1921. He puts it together in this particular book, and he sends it out to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of the top thinkers in the world. And only one person responded to him, and that was Tesla. And John, what did Tesla say?
He said, Doc, you're wasting your time. No, he didn't say that.
John, help me out here.
The Doc, why did the chicken fly across the road?
Help me out, John. And what did Tesla say?
He told Doc to take this knowledge, this book. He said, put it in a time capsule, give it to the Smithsonian, and ask them to open it in 1,000 years. And at that point, perhaps mankind will be ready for the new knowledge that's within that book.
Okay.
So that's one of the greatest minds to this day the world has ever known, saying, look, you're way ahead of your time. All right. But you're not really ahead of your time, because those that are seeking new knowledge and new information, right, about the divine, well, right there it is in the title, the Universal One. So if you want to know how God creates and brings everything into being, takes it out of your sense range, right there it is.
So I'm going to go ahead, Karen, and then I want to continue with my point.
No, I think he also who kept it in their drawer when they found it. It was Albert Einstein.
Yes,
I had to keep that one in there. And it's also interesting because when we're talking about the noble gases, we always, the way to also equate it is the cosmic egg. So how they actually, even in Eastern tradition, it's the interstellar gas, the clouds of gas that create stars are called eggs, and anonymous meaning evaporating gases. So it actually ties right into Walter Russell's work.
Yes. Okay, so I wanted to make a point, though, to everyone who, how many long-term students do we have on? If you all would comment in there, for anyone who's watching this in the future. So this was actually written in 1926. Well, then he came along in 1947, and they published The Secret of Light. And this was some corrections, actually, that he had to the Universal One, but this was a continuation of his work. This is important to remember, because then the home study course happened in 1951. Okay, in 1951. And then after that came another book called The Atomic Suicide. And that book was published in, it was published in 1957.
57. Oh.
So I was actually laying this out because for me, Kimberly Faith, I've been studying a lot of this stuff now for 4 years, and I was working on, in my head, I needed help putting it all together. So I mentioned this to you. We, as this group of students, are focused on the home study course. That is the path that we're taking. But for those of you that actually work with Russell, do know that his knowledge actually evolved as well as he was growing in his own journey. John?
Well, when you use the word corrections, how many corrections did he have to make when he wrote the Iliad?
Not one.
So what word would you prefer versus corrections? Evolving?
The Secret of Light
Both Iliads
was written so that he could use the language that is more familiar with science. It wasn't that he was correcting the original treatise, if you will. It was that he was trying to make it more understandable to people in the scientific community. So I think correction means
I stand corrected.
You were wrong, and then he's like, okay, well then I had to make it right. So we kind of lose credibility when you say that.
Okay, so I stand corrected. However, when I first came into the museum, and I actually had a conversation with the chief science officer at the time, Darren, he actually, when we walked through and we looked at all the science illustrations, you could actually see where Walter was gaining in his understanding and evolving and being able to explain it, John. I guess that's the way it is, even through over his years, as how he continued to grow. And wouldn't that be the case for all of us, that we're all on this journey to continue to grow in our understanding?
Sure.
I stand corrected, sir. We're continuing our conversation. So why don't we go ahead to the bottom of page 825. And let's go ahead to that.
It's break time. It's break time.
That's where I was going. I wanted to get this last.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I was just trying to get in that last highlighted, yellow highlighted thing. I was going to ask John to read that last yellow highlighted circle before we end up going to break. So if John will read that, I'll hand it to Ken, and then we'll go take our first break.
Okay, I love this. The Walter Russell charts of 1926, which have revealed the existence of 9 inner gases, and the much improved and more complete charts printed here will help you better comprehend why every element of the entire octave will return all the way to the seed of its beginning in the still white light of the source of all of them.
I thought that was incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. Ken, last thought before break?
I actually just had a question. Does anybody have any ambient noise on in the background? Because I'm just getting a little bit disruption,
Okay.
a fan or music or anything. Okay.
I will turn the fan off. I will turn off the fan. All right, everyone.
It's pulling,
We take a 3-minute break every 30 minutes. So we'll see you in 3 minutes. All right. If you will find your way back to us, please. Amazing. Amazing how 3 minutes ends up going by very, very quickly here. So I do want to just let you know, I'm broadcasting here from the Russell Museum here on Waynesboro, Virginia. And I must tell you, these lights get hotter and hotter by the moment. I'm going to tell you. If I put a temperature gauge in here, I'll have to figure out plan B. So everyone, we're going to just say welcome. Lots to show you, including the vibe board. And there were some really, really important charts that we're getting ready to go into. So any comment from the panel before we dive into the bottom of page 826? All right, let's go ahead and dive in here. So what they say there at the bottom, it says, these charts help us teach you the basic facts of life and instill within you the knowledge that the only way to accumulate power is by giving love out from yourself to other selves and to growing things. To give love to another who sorely needs it is to give him power to conquer his needs. And in turn, it gives you power to give more from yourself. And that way, both you and he multiply the power to give more love out from yourselves. So panel, I'm going to ask you to please comment on this, because that's a pretty philosophical paragraph here in the middle of a very scientific lesson.
That's
I'll give
what I
you.
love about the
I'm
lesson.
sorry.
All
I'll
right,
give you a little.
Karen, then John. All right, hold on. Karen, then John, and then Ken. Karen?
No, for me, this is what I so loved about this lesson. It actually shows you how nature works, and that if you mirror nature's philosophy and you actually do it, you are empowering others, but you're empowering yourself, because you're giving yourself that also the attaboy to go do more, because you can make a difference.
I actually love that, Karen, because even I was with an executive leadership team and we were talking just recently, and I keep telling them that if we as leaders, everything we need to know about leadership is actually in nature, and how we could transform this world if we would default to that. John?
Well, since Leo was co-author of the home study course, but she simplified that last paragraph by saying that you can only have that in life which you first give.
Let's capture that, James. You can only have that in life that you first give. Ken, you want to comment, and then Jim?
Yeah, what they're going to get ready to explain is they're going to reference a tree and a branch, and that the branch that extends from the tree feeds off the root system that we don't see above the ground. But that again is something I've illustrated before about, most of us only live in half the world, yet we do know the other half. Most of us only see the top half of a tree, but there's a whole root system underneath there feeding that top half of the tree. And that's what they're talking about. The power's in that root system. It's not really in the tree that you see. The tree that you see is just again that expression.
Okay, we had a bit of an internet. Okay, and a little bit of an internet glitch. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, one more thing is that the seed thing that's so beautiful, that is, if you went into the desert and you dug down 3 cubic feet, you would find seedlings down at the level of 3 cubic feet. So that's how far down those seedlings go. And if you think where 3 cubic feet is down to the ground, you imagine we think mankind can blow up the world, but you're only going to blow up the first top of the surface. There's still 3 feet left to go that'll regenerate and reaccumulate life one more time in the existence of mankind, which has probably been wiped out more than one time, is what history is showing us. But the seeds keep growing, and the future is always going to be repeating itself over and over again in everyone's life if you don't change the pattern. And that's what this message is about changing the pattern, the way we look at the world, to see the whole picture and not just get stuck in that sensed half of yourself. And that whole picture is that inner light that we're always awakening through this message within, the inner light within, that still inner light, which is exactly what we're talking about the octaves. When we talk about the color spectrum, they talk about the white light that divides the 4 pairs of colors. Well, that white still light is where all colors come from.
Thank you. That's very beautifully said. Jim, what do you want to add to it before we continue?
I like how they pointed out that all life is born from the seed of the inert gases. Thank you. The seed of the inert gases, and then it goes to body seed, which is the fruit of all things, and then that falls and repeats itself over and over and over again. And Ken was correct. It doesn't matter what we do to seemingly stop the seed from manifesting. It will manifest. If we blew the planet up, a new one would roll into place, which is a seed for the next level of the next humanity. So you can't destroy the inert gas, the seed.
Okay.
You cannot do it. You can delay it. You can cover it up, but you cannot stop it.
So can I ask the team, I know in one of the many charts that I've studied with Walter Russell, they used another word for inert gases. Wasn't that the word notes?
Yes.
Octaves.
Okay.
In the octave.
The octave.
There,
But
the octave. Yes.
the notes. Okay. Octaves. because what struck me is that, John, we'll talk about it later. We're getting ready to show the cosmic clock, but during your presidency, you found an illustration where Walter Russell had called it the Grand Symphony of Creation. So for those of us that might not necessarily have a heart for this word inert gases, the octaves, or thinking about it as musical notes instead, to me, that finally spoke to me, and I started to understand this a lot more. John, can you comment?
Yeah, and think of all the beautiful music in between the octaves as they unwind
Right.
and spiral in and out. Yes.
Right.
So that's why Doc named it the Grand Symphony of Creation. How beautiful.
Now, and you had said that he didn't have that title in the Universal One because he was trying to appeal to scientists. So it was later that he added it. But when we begin to think about everything we're discussing here tonight, that even springtime is like a symphony. The bursting of John actually builds his entire garden around new things coming to bloom every 2 weeks. And when we walk through the world and we see spring coming, you can almost feel nature singing in a way, because you see the burst of the dogwoods and the burst of the color and the burst of the trees and the green coming forth. I mean, it is a lovely process. So I bring that up for those of you that are new, not to be fearful over this word of inert gases that might not tap dance in your heart. But octaves may do that.
Kimberly, here's the interesting part. When you look at chemistry and you go to Wikipedia, you'll see that every chemistry has a color attached to it. So when you see the colors, you also know that musical notes are attached to color. So they're really all the one and the same thing. If you can think of them that way, you can actually begin to see that as it spins up and down the windings with the lenses, you're going to see the very different colors. That's how you see the colors in the rainbow. But they also have, the chemistry has colors, music has colors attached to its A, B's, and C's. So it's all still one and the same thing as how you look at it.
All right, I love it. So let's dive. Yes.
Follow up on Karen's statement there. There's a beautiful chart in the Universal One where Dr. Russell shows you the colors of the musical notes.
Yes.
On the piano keys.
I have it in the next thing. I have it in the
video.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Sorry.
Yeah, this is where it all begins to really make sense and where it's so beautiful. Ken?
Yes, another name for the inert gases is the locking points.
Okay. All right.
That's it.
All right. So let's dive into H26.
Can I jump in for 1 second?
Absolutely. Of course.
Sorry. But keep in mind what the Russell said early in book 11. The inert gases are heaven. They are the seed from which all things are born, and they are the heaven to which all things return. And between them, in the 9-octave wave, are the many houses. In my Father's kingdom, there are many houses that Christ talked about. Christ was not only a mystic, illuminate, Christ-conscious, God-conscious being. He was the consummate scientist of all time. And that too is in his statements.
Very, very powerful. And I have to tell you, understanding that the inert gases were also octaves and notes made my heart relate to all of this work so much better. I have to tell you, because the first 2 years I kept hearing inert gases, and I have to tell you, it just didn't do anything for my heart. I just couldn't get it, folks. I tried and I tried. John would keep preaching, keep talking to me about the inert gases, and I just couldn't warm up to that phrase. And then when I saw the Grand Symphony of Creation, all of a sudden I was like, oh, the heavens opened up to me, Jim. And I began to understand this musical, this beautiful, that the universe really is in fact a music. Okay. That's why it's called uni-verse. Ken? And then I'm going to 826.
They're also called master tones.
Master tones. Yes. That's what the word I was looking for.
Here is, we have Bonnie here. It says, spring is a symphony of colors, plants, best time of the year. But interestingly enough, the colors change just like the rainbows change by the seasons. So they mirror that same process. Like you get the green and you get the color, but remember when it gets to be in the fall time, the colors begin to dim and they get more of the darkness to them, and then they fall and they drop to the ground. And they get banana spots.
We talked about that. That's exactly right. All right. So James, if we could pull up 826, please. So 826, I want to be able to see the whole thing. So if you all would, that first, if you can reduce yours a little bit, James, and then I'll go to the vibe board in just a moment. But this image right here, it says the 9 octaves of white light accumulating in the ratio of the inverse cube of which the centering cube contains within it our 9-octave universe from invisible light to visible. And even then, not visible until its 4th octave. So while the panel is talking about that, I'm going to go over here to the vibe board to make it up a little bit bigger. So what needs to be said about that? Team?
Well, I think
it's not complicated so much as to remember that this process is a process that has evolved over 4.5 billion years on this earth. So you're seeing that in the creation, and that's why. So don't let it overwhelm you. There will be simplicity to it. It will make sense. And even the sun has a cube around it. Earth has a cube around it. All the planets have a cube around it, and that's what divides them from colliding each other. All the stars out there, they didn't have that cube wave boundary field. That wave boundary field keeps things from colliding into each other.
All right, so let me ask the team, is this image, I'm asking for clarification, is this image the same thing about being the cube and going down and down and down? So we've shown this to the group before. So if we would, I'll go a little bit lower, but there it is. So it's the same kind of process, is it not?
It is.
Okay, so it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Let me come over here so you all can see it.
That's also the golden ratio.
We have,
and also what you're seeing.
Go ahead.
Also, what you're seeing is compression. You're literally watching how things compress themselves in a 9-octave manner, right? We're not showing the sphere, we're showing the cube here because this is all about the projection. Remember, they started out this lesson as the projectors. The cube is the projector. It reflects the light that circulates to create that sphere. So that's why the cube is so important. You think of it as a projector, a one-way mirror almost would be a better way to say it, but it is a projector. And it's almost, if you were to take a negative, old school 35 millimeter negative, right? It's gray and it's magnetic, and once light hits it, an image is formed. And that's exactly what those cubes do. They are the steel frame of one side of a 35 millimeter frame. So imagine 6 sides of that, and God's light projects into that to create the next stages. And it does this in 9 steps.
Okay. So John, what needs to be said? Because there on the bottom of page 826, they go into talking about, let us demonstrate the basic fact in plant life. So if you would, just read that section underneath there. It starts with that particular phrase underneath that image.
All right, very good. Boy, Kimberly, look at your artistic talent there with that tree. Got the leaf tree.
I'm like a child.
And she's got the roots in there and everything. Look at that.
She does, man. Let Kimberly demonstrate that basic fact in plant life. Every branch which extends from a tree constantly needs more of the power of love to help it extend. And the giving of that power by its trunk gives more power to the body, even to its very roots. I know that makes Ken happy. Likewise, each smaller branch which extends from that body gains and re-gives the power of love to the very roots. And that includes the smallest twig of another species, which may be grafted upon it, and which another identity for that especially needs power to help it survive from the hurt of its operation. Observe the work of Luther Burbank, in transmuting trees.
All right, so let's stop there, John. All right, so let's stop there for a minute, because this idea of the tree is incredibly powerful. In fact, when I was in England last summer, I had a chance to visit Stonehenge, and I went to the Avebury Circle of Stones, and there was a very special section of trees. And the 2 trees, what happened during that time is paganism always wanted the view of the back in the day, they explained, always wanted the view of the sun and the moon. And when Christianity got big, they didn't want people looking to nature. And so they planted trees to block the view of that particular city. So you could not see the line from the moon to the sun, because they were trying to say that isn't God. So that was an area that went through. That was an era that they went through. What was interesting is there were these 4 trees all combined together, and 2 grew on top of stone, and they could not reach water at all. There was no soil at all. But the 2 trees on the outer rim could reach soil. And they said what ended up happening with those 4 very important trees is the 2 trees on the outside continued to bring the nutrients and the water in, and they started to sustain the 2 trees in the middle. And it was something that just was really, really touching to me when I heard that story, because it was such an example of exactly what happens here. It took great love for them all to survive. John?
So are you saying that Christendom can't see the forest because there's trees in the way?
I'm just passing along an era that they were talking about, and it was kind of something about, again, how nature did overcome what humans were trying to do to block what the view was. Ken?
Yeah, what they're describing there is hybrids, right? We've learned to take, and we've got, John could talk about that in the botanical life, right? You got flowers, and why has that flower got purple on the outside and white on the middle? Well, that wasn't what nature made, but we're able to hybrid those plants. That's another way of saying grafting. So that's about the hybrids, and that's what they're trying to say. The seed can be, by man, create a whole new entity of something, and it would be a grafted entity of that something.
All right, so I'm going to dive in here to the 827 because we've got some big concepts to continue, but there was something really important at the yellow highlighted paragraph here, and I'm going to share it with a group and then ask them to comment. So they were giving us the preludes, and it talks about how they're trying to prepare us for the understanding of how the desire for gaining power through knowing the secrets of God's creation was gradually multiplied from the inconceivable thinness of the early octaves until their thickness made it possible for man to see and measure their body and potential. So we talk about the vast distances of galaxies, which are millions of light years away, but even a super intellect must strain to comprehend such distances as that. So panel, please talk about this thinness in the early octaves to the thickness in the later octaves.
Well, the thinness of the early octaves are those octaves that we cannot perceive. We have no instruments yet to perceive them. They're the ones that precede hydrogen right now. So they're so vastly expanded, yet they're still matter, but they're so vastly expanded we can't record their wave frequency. We can know it, and that's why the Russells keep pointing out that when you reach that God center and you have that flash of knowing, you can know their existence because you are present there. We're all present there right now. Those that see ourselves mostly as body are not aware of our presence there. That's what an illumination is. We become aware of our presence everywhere in all 9 octaves. And that's what the mystics bring back to us. And that's where we all sit there and go, what?
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to comment on that before I continue?
Well, how many spheres surround the Earth?
Go ahead.
Is it 2? Is it 4?
I'm waiting for the answer,
2,
John.
bioconvex. 2.
No. So there's multiple spheres, and the further out you go, right, the thinner they become, the less oxygen and other gases that are in there, right, until you get out into outer space, right, where the thinness of those gases are so spread out that they can't form anything. But then you come from the outside in and you start compressing, right? And you compressing to visibility and keep compressing at greater thickness and size and so on and density. So
okay. So I think it's important, John. I'm going to ask James and Joey to communicate behind the scenes and find ourselves a decent picture of the solar system that shows that particular concept, because I do think that's very, very important as we go into this next part. So because down here on the page, we're just going to start with the charts before we go into break. So everybody hang tight. It says, therefore, at the beginning, if we'll look at the bottom here of page 827, it says, we now therefore print the 2 charts of elements made by Walter Russell in 1926. We're getting ready to show those. And it says figures 75 and 76 show how it is that atomic energy came into man's world. And then there's a more a recent chart that affords greater opportunity. But I want to go down here to where it says it in green. These will then help you understand the transmutation principle, the power projection principle, and the solar energy principle, which will aid man in advancing his science 1,000 years in the next decade, and thus realize his purpose of manifesting the God of love upon his earth. All right, that's pretty loaded. That's pretty loaded. So let's just go here right quick as we're looking. I want to I want to go to the two charts that they actually. Go ahead. I want to come over here to the two charts that we're introducing. So here are the two charts that they were talking about here. So if you would, John, why don't you just introduce us to this idea of the two charts?
All right. So those two, I'll use Russell terms, are kind of like mated pairs. The charts are mated pairs. So the one on the left, if you were to start at the top and look down, then what you would see is the chart on the right. And you will see the spiral.
Yes. So very important to understand this because I didn't understand that for quite some time. So let's just remind everybody of what that looked like. I'm going to pull together this idea here. So remember, if we were to collapse it, John, this is what you're saying. This is what we would see.
Yes.
Okay.
Be half of it.
Half of it, yeah, because the other half was this, but I'm doing the best I can with what I have here. Okay. So what do you all want to say about the charts as we get ready before we only have a few minutes before break? What do you want to get people to be thinking about with this chart right up front?
I want to simplify it. If I could see the charts again, please.
Yes, please.
For those that are still having a hard time grasping that, imagine you reached into, see the round one on the right. Imagine you reached into center. Like that's a coil on the stove. You reached into the center and you grabbed that and you pulled it straight up. You would have the chart on the left.
Ah, okay. All right. John, what do you want to tell people before we end up taking a break and come back to diving into
If you will notice I believe, well, it's not, okay. It is complete because that chart on the right, Dr. Russell shows it twice in the universal one, and one where it doesn't have quite, he doesn't list all the elements. He kind of simplifies it more and leaves all the elements out in their locked positions and so on. But Jim's right. And if you can just visualize what's happening there. So you're seeing the same chart just from two different directions and two different dimensions.
Yeah, so let me show everybody. This is important for us to understand because it took me a few years before I could actually get this. So notice how all of these are right there. Hold on, okay? And notice that the same words are when you go into alphanon, and then it starts going through the octaves. Okay, right here, and it's the same words. So this goes into more description as you all can learn. And as we go into this, when we return, we're going to have a lot more to say about this. So Karen, when you've actually been using this to actually with your video, what final comment do you want to say to inspire people that are listening that say, I have no idea what this means? Why is it important for them to tune in?
And don't say I don't have any idea either.
She's frozen.
Oh, Karen is frozen? Okay.
Bummer.
All right. Well, we'll try it there. So here's the thing. If those are the two charts that we're going to dive into, we're actually going to draw some things on them. We're going to talk a little bit about them when they get back. And Ken, what would you say as to, because you've been studying this for 30 years and you've been gaining an even greater understanding lately about the power of these charts. What would you say to somebody to make sure that they stay with us and they don't give up when they're hearing the scientific conversation?
I would say that it's worth studying and to think of it like music. And if you didn't want to play music, that's fine. But if you'd like to know the dynamic of how you operate, what's the peak of your life, and then what do you do at the first stages, the second stages, and so on, and what the growth of life is, then it's really worth checking out these elements. Don't let them complicate you too much. There's really only 123 of these elements here right now. So, and that's with the isotopes. So it is not that complicated. It does take a little bit of studying, but in principle, it's to show you that if it wasn't shown, and Kimberly illustrated there, if that graph was back up, you would see the beginning in the 10th octave and the beginning of the first octave, right, is the alpha and omeganon. The alpha and omega, as Jim likes to reference, is the beginning and the end. So the beginning is the end and the end is the beginning, and that's how we get that repetitive cycle. So to know the cycle of life is also, if you bent that in half, you would have 4 spheres.
Okay.
If you would bend it at the carbon octave there, I can't, argon octave, you would then, those would all fold over. As you could see, they would become spheres, and that's why you can see that cosmic clock on the right, and why it's so important to get the idea of how these things make. But the most important thing is, I'm going to go back to Jim and there about the carbon octave. That's midlife. When you're in the carbon octave, you're about midlife, and you're at your midlife point. You are mentally at your peak, spiritually at your peak, and physically at your peak. And from that point, you degenerate. But remember, day follows night, night follows day. Which one's more important? They both equally matter and make for a whole 24-hour period. So the reason for knowing this is sometimes, why am I here? What am I supposed to do? And also the reason for knowing this is because what I am, you are. What I can do, you can do. And the most important thing, the profound thing to me about these elements is what you're looking at in these elements is you're looking at the same tools that we have, or the same tools that God uses to create. And we, if you know those elements, then you can create on a level that's far deeper and far past superficiality that you've never even begun to comprehend until you started to know. So remember, the reason that God says what I am, you are, and the kingdom of heaven is within, is because God uses the same tools. That 9-octave wave is the same. God doesn't go before that or after that. So God does it. It's not about all knowledge of everything, because then we couldn't be there. What this is about all knowledge of how things are made. And that's what omniscient means, is God knows how all things are made. And therefore, that's what you're seeing in these elements. So it's kind of neat to know how things are made, and what, it gives you a lot of flaws. It helps you get a lot of knowledge.
Well, and what I've realized, Kimberly Faith, so Karen Elkins is having trouble with her battery, so that's why she popped off just a little bit. So we'll be ready for her. And so what for me, with there's so much discussion around the ascension of humanity, all of a sudden the charts made so much sense to me. It was like a night and day. Welcome back, Karen. It was like a night and day aha for me over this week as I was studying. And remember, that's what they said about the home study course. It is an illumination, one word at a time. This is why, for those of you that are just joining us, the home study course written by Walter and Lara Russell, that is what this group of students is dedicated to, is having you get excited and inspired to want to actually learn and go through the home study course. But their idea was that you would do one lesson a week, one unit a month, over a course of 12 months. And that's what we're here. We're here at the end of unit 11, here at the last lesson, because then that's where it begins to make sense. And so John and Jim have been through this for 50 years. Ken's been through this for 30 years. I've only been through this for 4, and this is Karen's first time, even though she's been involved with the Russell work for quite some time. And even last week, Karen, you really touched me when you said, wow, I knew of Russell's work, but going through the home study course made all the difference in the world. All right. So it is time. It is time here for our next break. So we want you to stand up, relax, get some oxygen, water. We'll see you in 3. All right, if you'll find your way back. All right. So the biggest challenge when actually thinking about how to move forward to this is that when you have your home study course, you're able to flip back and forth to the images and to the text. So doing it this way is a little more challenging, although I think we're going to have some exciting conversations here. To the team, to the panel, what I was going to make sure is that as we're going into, I would like us to go ahead and get into 8:30, but I want to show everybody something right quick. So these are the 3 images that are being discussed. And so, John, if you would, please give each one of them the name of what the charts are, because these are the 3 images. If you want to take a screenshot so you all can zoom in on them. What's the one on the left, John?
Karen, can I say something real quick?
Kim, yes, you can, Jim.
I mean, Kim, I'm sorry, Kim.
That's fine. K's and K's, J's and J's.
This might be a good time to remind new students out there that that sometimes cannot afford the course in its entirety, that they can buy it unit by unit throughout the year.
Okay, they can sign up for a monthly one month at a time. Absolutely. We'll drop that information in there. So this is part of why we encourage people to get the home study course. So John, I want to go back to what the question was. What is the name of the chart on the far left?
The Russell periodic chart of the elements, number 1. Is that what you want me to reference?
Yes. And what is the one in the middle?
And that's the Russell periodic chart of the elements, number 2. Just giving you a different perspective on how the elements are set up. So if you're looking downward, or if you're looking through from the side, that's what you would see. And then,
all right, and then the one on the right.
Yeah, and the one on the right, that takes a little thinking to walk through that one.
All right. Well, here, I just want to mention to everybody. So when I first came to the museum, I have to tell you, so when I came into the museum, this is the day that I met John, I'm walking through the scientific chart, and we all remember I had shared a few units ago that the God is Light poster, which I'll ask James or Joey to bring up in just a minute. That's the one that first stopped me in my tracks. This one is the second one that stopped me in my tracks. This one is called the 9-octave harp of the universe. And I have to tell you, this one made me remember so many things that obviously I had an understanding of some of this, and I had actually experienced it. So this was very, very powerful. We won't be able to get all into it this evening, but it says the 9-octave harp of the universe. And so, John, you know that since from the very beginning, I actually was really, really interested in having a harp
Yes,
at the museum. And why was that? Because I was wanting to make this very, very real for everybody.
Well, only you would know that.
Well, you were there when we were discussing it. So the reason is because, to be honest with you, what I realized when I saw these charts all in one room is that this was the Grand Symphony of Creation. And what was incredibly powerful, being that it was all music, there was something in me that resonated, that here was Walter Russell talking about the power of creation. And he was actually mentioning the 9-octave harp of the universe. So right away from the very beginning, it was music. So, I mean, that's hugely powerful. So when you think about this, it said from the very beginning, and I'm coming to you, Ken, for me, who had no exposure to this kind of conversation, you've been saying all along, if you can read and count to 9, you too can master the secrets of the universe. Ken?
Yeah, it's really important to you've heard it, the adage that a cat has 9 lives. Well, so do you. And every element has 9 lives, and that is really why also it's important to know it shows the 9 stages of your life, the 9 stages of life in itself. And so it's not that complicated. It's stuff you already know. But if you want to know more about yourself and creation, and you want to create, then as you learn these little things, and it doesn't mean everything, it means in stages. Start with the first octave, start with the end octave. It really makes sense. The beginning is the end and the end is the beginning. And that's how we get repetitive cycles, right? So it's not as difficult as you think. Start with the 9 inert gases, right? Just learning the 9 gases, and you will have knowledge of things, of why helium floats and why that's the first octave, and what argon is and what krypton is, and what what these elements and these gases are, why they're so important to know that they are the seeds of life as those inner gases. So learn those first, and then start with the elements, and then start with the split tones from there. That would be my suggestion. The octaves, then the inner gases, the elements, and then the split tones, the isotopes of those elements, which are all things, as you start to study them, they really will make sense. It may sound foreign. So this is not as complicated as it seems.
So Ken,
All
why
right.
don't you do Wednesday specials on those?
We should, Karen. All of it. We have lots to do Wednesday specials. This team could be broadcasting every week, several times a week for the rest of the year. So I want to please understand that. What I learned when we did our first round of extra broadcasts is there's a great deal of pre-work that it takes for everybody before that, and so we're all just trying to integrate it. And I wanted to be sure that we focus on officially accomplishing this. But yes, Karen, we could be broadcasting, and I hope the studio will someday be broadcasting 24 hours a day so that everyone can have access to the Russell work. James, if you would bring up that God is Light poster. So this is the illustration drawing, the first one that stopped me in our tracks. And so if you would, John, you actually placed this at the very beginning of the science room before people even get into these. Please reiterate why. For me, it was so much truth in this one image, which, by the way, you can order many of these images as posters. If you go to philosophy.org and go to the store, we'll drop that link in the chat box along with the code. But why did you have this at the beginning, John, and tie this into what we're discussing here today?
Well, the reason I put that first is what comes before God? Nothing. So that's why God was at the forefront. Right there. As soon as you walk in, here we go. The science of the future is based upon God, the creator. God is light, God is mind, right? And then you see the sequence there of how God creates. Now, we're not going to read and go into all of that, but there is a sequence to everything in a way. So even though you can't see God, you can't sense God, and what can you only do with God?
Be one.
Know God.
Know God.
But you can know God. So
well, and before,
one with
yes. And notice that it has the three omnis up there. Mind is alone, omniscient and omnipotent. Light is alone, omnipresent. Ken, you had a thought.
Yes. It says God is light, God is mind. Well, guess what you are? Your body is light and you are mind. You are not your body. Your body is nothing but a vehicle. Just like God's light is the purpose of manifesting duality and creation, but it all comes from God's mind. We are, and that's why we are to really recognize how omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient we are. Is again going back to these elements is the same tools that God's used. And so if you learn these elements, then you can use the same tools that God used to create whatever you might want to create. Cold light, which would be luminon, and any kind of thing like that. There's going to get into some, we've seen some coils in lesson 10, lesson 10. You see that there's a coil and there's transmutation of electricity, how to create more energy from a 4-octave coil as opposed to just a singular coil, which we still use this day. We do not use a 4-stage coil, which would generate even more power and more conductivity. So, but I do like that God is light and God is mind. So am I, and so are you.
Love that. Love that. John?
At the beginning there, Ken reminded me of that little pamphlet that I'm writing. It's titled, God Doesn't Mind Because You're Not Matter.
we need a t-shirt on that one. Always keeping a sense of humor. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead then. And I want to dive into page 830 because we've got a few pages and there's some things I think important to read. And so I want to encourage everyone who's watching here this evening, please just breathe in with us. And I'll breathe out. And I'd like you to just relax into the conversation and just receive it. And not let your human self get in the way. At a deep soul level, you already know these things. If you are here in matter, you've actually lived through this process, and that's what we're going to show you. So here under 830, I'm going to ask John, if you would, start us with that first paragraph. Let us study figure 77, which, by the way, is the octave chart on the far right side. So when they're referring to figure 77, it is the 9 octave harp. John, what's that paragraph?
Very good. First, take note that carbon is the pivotal center of the 9 octaves and is the anode position. It is the first of the wave amplitudes to have closed its hole and reversed its direction of compression from outward to inward. And that's where Jim would make the statement of the divine masculine switching and becoming the more predominant divine feminine.
Okay, so let me ask you all, is this the time for me to draw it out, or are we going to dive in a little bit longer? You tell me when. You saw me practicing earlier. Let me know when it's the appropriate time to actually draw it out. So let's go ahead into, at the bottom of that second paragraph, it says, but like the tree which burned or died when it matured, another tree or group of trees will sprout from those very roots. And so, Ken, if you would read what's in that green highlighted there. The carbon is the first amplitude.
Carbon is the first amplitude element which has acquired sufficient strength to extend children from itself.
All right. Can you comment on that and then continue reading the paragraph, please?
Well, you know, what we're talking about here is that when it reaches a state of carbon, when we reach our maximum potential, if you think about it as in midlife, you're now at that point where, you know, you can acquire, you've made a family, you've created children in your own, you're creating your own family. Usually that's when the fatherhood or motherhood comes in, and then strength to extend your children is the knowledge that you've learned at that stage of life. When you're first a parent, it's the right, and you have your first child, it's like, oh my God, what do you do? What do you do? But as you begin those stages of growth and you see your baby survive the first year and then get into its years, you start to be able to extend to that child your knowledge and your things you've learned, and that's bringing up the youth. So when you're at your maximum potential, that's when you can really, I think, extend that kind of knowledge and that kind of information and education to our children, which are, again, our root systems.
So I should have brought back an image from Unit 1 earlier, but I'm going to ask our team if they'll look at some of our previous slides. There is an image from one of the earliest lessons where it talked about birth, teenage, adulthood, and it actually showed that in what you were just talking about. So maybe we can find those. But if you would keep reading that paragraph, Ken, because there's a lot packed into that very important paragraph.
Sure. It is completed spectrum from itself, its completed spectrum divided by a uniting equator places it in the father-mother position, both of whom as divided pairs have united in balance to produce children such as our Earth, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and other planets. All of these planets and their moons are children of our sun. And that is a really powerful, I'm going to stop there for a second, is to think about that, right? How many planets do we have in our solar system? Anybody?
Well, it can't be 9.
That's right. It can be 9, and if you were to be academically trained or science-based, maybe you wouldn't consider that. But I like 9 because we learn about these 9 octaves and the importance of them. So the sun is the crucible. So everything you see on this earth came from that sun over 4.5 billion years. So when we talk about the elements, the cube, the sphere, and all these things, remember it's taken, because the question I'll go back to last week was the bird. So how does a bird relate to the sphere cube? And you're too far forward, right? You got to go from its beginning. You got to start with that first feather, that first seedling that bird becomes before you get to the stage of seeing that full bird. Right. So every element that comes off that sun, every blade of grass is born on that sun and comes here. And here's the kicker, right? You would say the sun rays, the luminosity from the sun, that light is dying as it goes through space. It's 90 million miles. So in essence, it's become really long waves. And then it comes into our global atmosphere, Earth's atmosphere, which acts like the lenses, what we talked about, opticity, the opticity of life. And those waves are then converted from long waves to short waves like a magnifying glass by the outside boundaries of that 9 octave sphere, which would be lenses. So you got 2 bioconvex and you got 7 concave lenses that construct the sphere that we're talking about. So our atmosphere acts as those bioconvex and then compresses those long waves from the sun to create life. All the life that we know comes from that sun. The sun is the crucible of life. And those planets are children of that sun that spring out from the equator of the sun. They come the radiation that actually spring from the rotation and equatorial phase of that sun.
Okay, so powerful conversations here. Let me continue with this particular paragraph. It says, it has been but a few 100 million years that human life became existent on our Earth. This next sentence blew me away. Venus will be the next planet to become ready for human life like this Earth. However, it will not be ready for such life for several 100 million years. It takes all these long years of preparation to reborn the seed of humans like us. Our Earth will slowly pass out into the cold of space as Mars, Saturn, and outer planets have already done. When Venus is finally ready for life, the human seed will appear on it because the seed is carried in the inert gases and it is eternal. All right, panel, I need you to comment because that was a wow paragraph. Jim?
Well, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, it is just that. It's seed. If you just take the simple male-female principle, the male carries the spermacide that enters the womb of the female egg. And only when those two come together that can you have multiplicity. Only when they come together as one can you multiply the cells. 2, 4, 8, 12, which grows the next, structure, whether you're talking about a human being or a planet. The principles are the same. The two have got to come together as one, voiding each other out in divinity, and then multiplicity takes place.
Well, and when you think about that, 9 months is how long it takes for us to carry a baby. Yeah. So, John, then I'm coming to Ken. Go ahead, John.
What am I supposed to comment on now?
Well, I was just asking you to comment on the overall paragraph. Just in general, that's a pretty big deal for human beings to realize that the same process that we created human beings. I mean, we are actually little mini creators here on Earth. We come together, we create. Yes, absolutely. And I was coming to you next, but okay, we'll jump ahead to Ken.
Yeah, then we'll come back to John while he thinks about the paragraph.
Thank you, Ken.
All right, so no, because you're going to have something to say on this. I just know it. So here's the kicker, right? Venus is in a mineral state, and every planet, just like Earth, when it was first started, was a molten rock. And then that molten rock cooled and we became mineral. And the way that all life forms is mineral, vegetable, animal. So Venus is in the rock hot stage, but the cooling of it is going on because it's covered by steam. There's a bunch of steam around Venus, and because it's so hot. But so there's coldness, wetness, and dryness, and Venus is so hot, like Earth was going back 4 billion years ago, was a molten rock. So again, mineral is first in the stage of life, then comes vegetable, and then comes animal. So we've heard in our Freud's theory, a single cell organism, right? So in fact, that's where that sun crucible comes in. And we started out, think of how long it takes one cell, single cell to start. Then that cell, as Jim just said, splits into 2, and then 2 splits into 4 to make a human body. Your body is made up of cells.
Ken, we're losing you with the internet. All right, so let's Ken, we're giving you a break on the internet for a minute. John, if you would go ahead and jump in.
I think I lost everybody there. Am I back?
You did, yeah.
So anyway,
I think God wanted to cut Ken off there, just kind of shorten things up a little bit.
Yeah.
Ken, we're the internet.
No, just kidding.
John?
Go ahead, Monzel. You're up. Hey, John,
Okay.
You're getting a little dark back there. Would you lighten up a little bit? No, just kidding.
I know, man. Karen, she can't afford to pay the electricity bill here, so we're running on battery power. So, and I'm in a trailer. I want my fellow members here to know that I'm officially now trailer trash.
Would you stop? Go ahead. You're in a trailer. The comment, please, before we continue, folks.
Right.
We got a lot more to cover.
Now, not that it makes any difference, but so I have a question for Ken because we need to put things into perspective, right? So how old is Mars? How old is Neptune? How old is Uranus, right? How old is Saturn, right? So the sun bores planets in pairs of 4. So there can't be 9 planets. There's got to be 8. There's got to be 12. Point. Or there's got to be 16. Can't be 9.
But they're go ahead.
But anyway, not that I'm second guessing my partner here, but I'm just saying that, if we're going to
there's been quite a bit of conversation in the scientific world about whether Pluto is a planet. So let's just acknowledge that. So that has been a conversation that's been happening. And I would like to actually show you all something on the screen that I think would be helpful with this conversation, because I do want to remind the panel we are at 8:30 and we still have another page and a half to go. Ken, last thought before I draw on the board.
You see that asteroid belt there, Bonzel?
Yes.
What was that at one point? Did Doc say that potentially was?
That was a planet.
Ah,
okay.
So how many planets are there?
All right. So hang tight while the two of them have a conversation. Deborah Emanuel asked a question. Why are there only 4 planets born at a time? All right. So hang tight. I'm going to go over to the board because I do think drawing it out, folks. Can I ask the panel? I think drawing it out will be helpful at this moment. Would it not? And continuing our conversation. So I want to go for a minute. I want to go back to the balls. So we've shown these before. And so I want to make sure this one, the blue is this way. Am I doing that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then the red is this way. And so this process that we've been showing, okay, with these new toys that we have here, okay, are actually the process of creation of what I'm getting ready to draw on the cosmic clock. Are they spinning properly, team? Yes or no? Yeah. Give me a thumbs up. All right. So everybody remember this. Okay. As I go to the Vibe board, because this is important. So we're going to see whether or not when you're looking at these charts, and so I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to make this one really, really big. So let me scoot this out here. I'm going to scoot that out of the way. Okay. So if you would, I'm going to go ahead and try to, if I can, when we start here, if you would, John, articulate, or Ken, articulate what it is that I'm drawing. So I start here with the blue, and I'm following this, and I'm going, so this is the alphanon, and I'm going all the way through betanon, gammanon, helium, neon, and I come to argon. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, do I need to get bigger, James? James, speak in. Okay. Now, that's the 4.5 beats in. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Then what happens is it then changes to the red, and then it goes like this. It goes through krypton, it goes through xenon, it goes through niton, okay? I'm going to scoot in a little bit, and it goes all the way here. Okay, the alpha and the omega. Now, I'm going to continue. Let me go ahead and comment on that before I continue, please. So that is technically how those two areas are working. Yes or no?
Yes. That is half the wave.
Okay, that's half the wave. Okay, because then what happens is we get all the way to the end, okay, the omega, and it turns blue again. And then what happens is we turn around and we start coming back. And we start going back through this cycle. And then we end up changing to the red halfway through our cycle. And then we finish as we are descending all the way into matter.
I'm getting dizzy.
All right. Well, I just started right there because that's actually what is happening. So if we could just pause for the audience for just a moment and explain what that is, because until I actually saw that, I didn't even understand that's what you all had been saying all this time with the balls.
When you look at those charts, you have to look at the whole thing. And if you look at those outside rings,
yes,
and he shows you how, and you can read it, and it says that the disintegration means less volume. It's expanding. It's working its way back to 0, right? And then the compression side They get smaller. The rings get smaller. So this is just another demonstration of what we've been talking about for almost a year of compression and expansion, right? Male, female, red, blue. And this is just another example of it, but as it being true to nature.
All right, Jim, you want to add on?
I'm 100% in agreement with John.
Okay.
It's exactly true to nature.
All right. So as we're inching towards our time here, there's a couple of other things we need to read. If we can skip ahead to page 832, and do remember that we divided this into 2 lessons for this reason. Please send us your questions. Cindy, we see you. Deborah. Deborah does ask the question though about why are there only 4 planets born at a time. To me, it was showing that particular process. Team, would you please answer that before we go on?
How many rings are on either side of carbon? On both sides.
4.
Thank you.
All right. That's why. Jim, you want to add to that? I know we're getting close to the end here.
Well, so, yeah, I got a question. Oh, go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
I said that they're generated in 4s. They're not necessarily all born at the same moment. You have a succession of 4 planets, and then you have a succession of 4 more as those 4 move further out. And it's like an assembly line. 4 plus 4 is 8 plus 8 is 16 plus, and the sun will continue doing that as it radiates outward and gives everything that it has out, and eventually it turns itself inside out and there's nothing more to give. We call that death.
And I just want to add one more thing to that. That was really good. The moons of the planets are children of the planets. So our moon is a children of our planet. So that's what the moons are about. So the planets are parents also once they come and are bred from life. And I guess I would also contend that they're both male and female, because in that 4-stage process, are we saying that those are 4 male and then 4 female?
No, I would think 2 male, 2 female in each cycle of 4. But
yeah, each planet is male and female, right? Each planet has a
all
northern
right.
and southern. Okay.
All right. So here's what happens for all of you that are listening in. So it gets pretty exciting when you dive into this. For me, I would actually, if I went back to the old days, I would photocopy a picture of that and I would just keep drawing things over and over and over so I understood it. I would put it on my iPad, I would draw. And so to me, it was some big ahas. Later, not tonight, I'm not going to overwhelm everybody, but I actually understood the ascension process that we're going through with humanity based on this periodic element. So there's great power in these charts. For right now, though, before we even continue, I don't want to get a little bit deeper. I know we were supposed to go to page 833, but my heart is telling me that we need to go to Karen's video and decompress for just a moment. Breathe in through this, because how stinking exciting is it to be talking about creation? If you understand the creation of a planet, you understand the creation of a human, and then you understand where you are on your continuum. And to me, that is just electrifying and powerful and so heartwarming to me and gives me great hope. So Karen, I'm excited about seeing what you pulled together for us. Everyone else who's watching this visual journey, do remember, watch it with your heart space, okay? Don't get yourself all hung up in your head. Watch it with your heart space, because deep down, you already know. Let's roll the video and see what comes to mind. See what comes forth.
Come watch this, honey. Come watch this.
Wow.
I got some timing on some of them, so I got to fix them with the timing. Sorry about that.
Beautiful.
That, Aaron, you worked so hard to pull that together. We'll need to fix a few little tiny things, but this is, Deb Tonkin says this. She says this is your best one yet. Karen, I admire so much your passion for trying to give us a visual journey to help us. I'm curious, John, what is your thought about the video?
Oh, I love them all. I texted Karen earlier this week and told her I'd reviewed 3 of them back to back to back. Told her how wonderful they were.
Well, and please know for everybody who's watching, on your Awaken Your Inner Genius, the YouTube channel, under playlist, there is a playlist specifically which has all of Karen's visual journeys. So anytime we make adjustments, we upload the new one there, but those are all the visual journeys because it's so powerful. Jim, what is your thought about the video? And then I'll ask Ken.
I am thrilled that Karen, who it's her birthday, and then she gives us the gift of this video. It was wonderful. Thank you, Karen.
Very gracious.
I
Thank
love
you.
it. Thank you.
Ken? You're on mute. Ken's on mute.
Okay, I'm taking myself off. I think it's wonderful, and I think what's so important for the audience is to go back, like John just said, and review those. As we learned in the earlier lesson, a picture will stay in your mind, and the text has got to be comprehended and contemplated, but those pictures will actually create an image of your mind, and it'll correlate to the text you're reading. So I encourage you to read that text and then take those visual journeys, and you're really going to synergetically, they work really well together. Thank you, Karen.
So thank you, Karen. There was a comment from Karen Mahan there in the chat box, and it says, wow, I had to do some deep breathing there. Excellent. And Deborah also says this. She says, that was both beautiful and powerful. I have to go back and watch the recording so I can read it all. And that really is what it is about. And so there is one thing before we wrap up here this evening. I don't think that we need to keep going in the text here. We'll add more of that for next week. But I do want to ask everyone who's listening. There are many, many of you that have been following us the whole year. Please let us know, what are the techniques that have been most impactful to you? Do you appreciate the visual journeys? Do you appreciate the addition of the vibe board? Do you like the highlighted text? And you feel free to email us as well. But please let us know as we're preparing, because we will be wrapping this up by early June. And then we'll have a couple of special broadcasts before we start over with Unit 1 starting the beginning of July. So let us know, what are the things that have been most helpful for you on your journey? Your feedback is what's so important to us. And someday we're hoping, as the world is awakening more and more and more, that they're going to join and jump on. And we would love nothing more to have as many new students that are ready for the awakening. Is that true, Jim?
Absolutely.
All right, so to the panel, final comments before I share my final thoughts here this evening. What is the thing that needs to be said for this evening and as we go into next week?
Well, what comes to mind for me is to think back all the way to 1975 and the excitement that I had when Mr. Porter there introduced me to the home study course. And that excitement has never wavered. It's still as powerful today as it was 50 years ago.
So he handed you a part of the home study course and said, check it out, and it changed the direction of your life.
Yep, he's been trying to get rid of me ever since.
There you go. Any other final comments, Jim?
This, all night long, we've been talking about the seed. This is the seed for knowledge of the new age right here.
Wow.
Please plant it in your mind.
Beautifully said. Ken? Final thought for the
I'm
evening.
good.
All right, Karen. Go ahead, Ken.
No, I just really liked what I said at the beginning about my favorite part of this is about that finding ourselves is to find God within ourselves. And that's what this lesson is all about, is remember, God's within, and this lesson will help you find that God within. It certainly has helped me. And as John said there, I think it not only doesn't get old, it gets better every time you read it 30 years later. Every time I make a pass, I get more out of it, and it gets better and better. There is no finish line with this. There's no finish. There's no need to be a finish line. You just keep growing and growing. It's really beautiful.
Love that. Karen, your last thought for the evening.
I'm just happy to be here with the team and happy to be learning. So thank you.
And I am right there with you all. And so I want you to know that part of the dream, that when John and I first talked about creating this virtual studio here at the museum, it was all trying to honor the prospectus that Walter and Leo wrote. We'll maybe do a broadcast about that prospectus, but in there they said someday they hope to have a symphony, someday they hope to have a movie, someday they hope to have a radio station. And so the studio is the closest thing to the radio station. And for me, Kimberly Faith, it is an incredible honor. From the day that I walked in here almost 4 years ago, it has been nothing but a journey of love, of powerful love, and so many amazing ways. And most of all, we want to extend all of our love to all of you, those of you that are joining us tonight, and those of you that will be joining us in the future at any time, because love is eternal. And that is what all of this is about love for the Creator, love for the universe, and love for each other. And may we all usher in that love together. And so that is our final thought. We will see you. Please join us for Wednesday, the extra session with Karen, and then we will wrap up lesson number 44 next Sunday.
Happy birthday, Karen.
Thank you.
Yes, happy birthday.